Most tables in Magento that store some kind of entities have the two columns created at and updated at. For storing temporal values, we have the choice between the data types timestamp and datetime. And if only a date needs to be stored without a time component, then we can also use date. The timestamp type is stored as a Unix timestamp, and it can store values from 1970 January to January 2038. What's interesting, maybe, is that MySQL converts input values from the configured server time zone to UTC, and when values are retrieved, the UTC timestamps are automatically converted back to the server time zone. And this conversion only happens inside of MySQL, so it actually has nothing to do with Magento. Conventionally, Unix servers are configured to use UTC anyway, in which case no conversion happens. This is just something to be aware of in case your host is set up in a different way. For the datetime and date column types, this conversion to and from UTC doesn't happen. The value range for datetime columns is from the year 1000 to the year 9999, so it's much larger than for the timestamp type. Datetime literals are commonly formatted with a 4-digit year, 2-digit month, 2-digit day, and then a 24-hour time representation. And this format works for both datetime and timestamp columns. MySQL can recognize some other formats too, but they aren't used very commonly. Both datetime and timestamp columns can be configured to be automatically set to the current time when a value is inserted or when values in a record are updated. We do that by specifying the default value current timestamp. All in all, there are three possible default values for datetime and timestamp columns. We can say current timestamp, and we can also use a literal 0, which will set the column value to a datetime string representation with all zeros. And finally, we can also specify the default value null, which would be the same as not specifying a default. So let's go ahead and add a created at column first. I'll use timestamp here and use the current timestamp as the default. And now let's also add a updated at column. And there's one more attribute we can specify, which is on_update. If we set that to true, then Magento will generate the SQL that will automatically update the column to the current time whenever the record is updated. This naming of this onUpdate attribute is a bit unfortunate. It's not very expressive, and it also uses an underscore instead of camel case or just one word as all the other attributes. But, well, that's a pretty small flaw. Otherwise, it's a pretty nice part of Magento, the declarative schema. Anyway, just for completeness, all the temporal value type columns can also take a nullable attribute, which defaults to true, just like all other columns.